We have restarted the program. Hopefully everyone gets to see the PowerPoint. If not, once again, the PowerPoint is in PDF under handouts. We do apologize for the technical difficulties we're experiencing. Again, though, the handout is in a PDF. The PowerPoint is in PDF under handouts. And we're going to continue with today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Vicki Salemi is back and we're ready to roll. Just to recap, I finished talking about the FMLA and different states as well as different companies may have specific leave policies. So what you should do is, research your company's policy and really know what they provide. Some companies like Deloitte might provide a generous leave policy, others may not. And you can find that out by speaking with HR, speaking with your boss, looking at your company's intranet site. So you may be wondering how to speak to your boss, colleagues, and clients about such an intense time of your life that is really, really personal, but it's of course impacting your entire life and work is part of that. Well, first, what you could do is when you do approach your boss, tell him or her that you need to speak with them confidentially. And that would be, preferably face-to-face, preferably behind closed doors. And know your relationship with your boss. As you know, not all bosses are created equally. So your boss may not be compassionate, or you may have an extremely awesome boss who's really compassionate and a great listener. So prepare for that meeting ahead of time. And like I said, practice, research your company policy and know what's involved. And if you don't know, you can definitely leverage that meeting to ask questions, but you can practice ahead of time. And that could be just a matter of the same thing when I tell people how to negotiate a salary or talk about your career with your boss. Have bullets in mind ahead of time and what you're going to outline. You could say something like, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've had some absence. I've been absent a few times and there's a situation at home. The thing is, how detailed you get with your boss is really up to you. They do not need to know the specifics. However, in order to get it approved, you probably will need to fill out specific paperwork and state what's going on, but you don't need to be super granular with that. And for the American with Disabilities Act, for instance, yesterday I spoke to an attorney about an article I'm writing about pre-employment verification, and he said technically, employers can't ask you. There's certain things they cannot ask you because that would be just against the law. But if you reveal certain information, then that's up to you. So it's really how comfortable you feel saying, okay, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I'm the only caregiver in the tri-state area, right? And this is going to impact me. So know before the conversation, identify the relationship with your boss just so you can set your expectations, but also know what you're going to ask for. And that could be maybe it's just understanding, and maybe it's just, I know my work hasn't been up to standard lately, and here's why, and I'm trying as hard as I can. It's really hard for me right now to concentrate. Or maybe it's going deeper with a specific ask. Maybe you need to work from home 2 days a week. Or maybe you need more flexibility so you can take your loved one to a doctor's appointment, or whatever work arrangement that you think that you can ask for. Some companies have a shared time bank where people can donate their unused vacation time. Maybe you can use some vacation time. You may be able to tap into floating holidays. Some companies have elder care benefits, free counseling, which is a big one, employee resources, LifeWorks. So find out also what resources your company has, and then also determine whether or not you want your colleagues, clients, et cetera, to know your personal situation. And sometimes it could be helpful for you so they know what you're going through. But other times you may want to just create boundaries where you don't want people to know anything going on in your personal life. So that's really up to you. But you're all here for a reason. So because attending this webinar, because you're probably wondering, how do you navigate work? And it is challenging because there are certain times in our lives when work takes a backseat. And this is likely one of those times. So cut yourself some slack if you aren't able to perform at your peak performance. But it's helpful to speak with your boss and find out what options are available if you do need flexible work arrangements. If you can tap into some time that you didn't know what was available to you, maybe you can delegate some work and some colleagues can step up to the plate. With the example I gave earlier, with Deloitte, with the woman I interviewed who took 4 months of paid time off, she was so grateful that her colleagues were so supportive, just incredibly supportive. And she had peace of mind knowing that her work was getting done even before she went on leave and she needed backup. And then she was able to go on leave and have her time, energy, effort, everything focused towards her ailing mother. And then the last bullet, we're going to speak about self-employed situations, because what I've talked to you about so far is all about the full-time employment situation. I fall in this bullet, so if you do as well, we are not alone. But it gets trickier because we don't have an employer. We don't fall under the FMLA law, and it can be challenging, especially if you are constantly hustling and trying to find new clients and you don't have energy for that, let alone to work on your work deliverables. So for this, I would say hopefully you have some entrepreneurial friends who can support you. Sometimes it's a support system, like attending these webinars here and just finding ways to have resources to tap into. And you may need to have a conversation with your clients the same way you would speak to a boss. So maybe you need to tell your client, look, I need some extensions on these deadlines because I'm going through this personal situation. And again, it's up to you to determine how in depth you want to go. For me personally, I did tell my clients, look, I'm going through this situation and it's ongoing, and just so they were aware. And I felt like it was another way to connect, just so they knew kind of what's going on in my life. And then it becomes, unfortunately, the new normal where you adjust. And that's the awesome thing about us as workers and people overall is we are resourceful and think about how to adjust. But again, with the self-employed situations, you may find yourself not being able to, say, take on a new client, or knowing the important thing in this situation is to know what your bandwidth is. And I've seen caregivers who are self-employed had to give up some clients or just take a step back or bring on collaborators so they can work together in order to fulfill a deliverable. So again, it depends on your situation. So hopefully at the end, we will definitely have time for questions, because that's a lot of times, that's where I get the most questions about. It's just, how do I approach my boss, or I'm self-employed and what should I do, or I'm thinking about moving, and a lot of personal questions come up. But the point is, know what you're asking for, know what that you're driving the conversation, and know if you want your clients to know, or again, back to the full-time situation, what you want your colleagues to know, or maybe it's just what you want out of it. Maybe you just want them to have some compassion or understanding, or maybe your boss went through a similar situation with her or his family member. So it can just be helpful sometimes and cathartic to talk through it and find out what your solutions are. And one of them could be, going on a leave of absence, even if you are self-employed, if you can financially swing it, to take technically a leave of absence, maybe a month or 2 or 3, and just know what you are capable of, and also depending on your work, when you are able to ramp up again. So just a lot of these things to keep in mind, and you're a work in progress, and it's okay if you get upset during those conversations. We're all human, and you're under tremendous stress right now. And so hopefully you have a boss or clients that can understand. And this is another conversation for another day, completely unrelated. But if you talk to your boss and your employer doesn't support you, well, then that's another issue. And when you have bandwidth, then I would suggest trying to find a job with an employer who does, because the right employer and the right clients will hopefully wholeheartedly have your back. Okay, so the next question is, how can you actually work through all of this that's on your plate and you're emotionally drained, sleep deprived, all the above, and myself included? Okay, several ways to try to better manage it. The first, and these apply even if you're not caregiving. So hopefully the good news is once you master some of these techniques, that you can carry them with you for the remainder of your career, not just going through this period of time. The first is called the Pomodoro technique, and that's basically what it is. You set a timer, and it's called the Pomodoro technique. There's an author whose name escapes me right now, but he basically came up with this idea to set an old-fashioned timer. You can set the alarm on your phone, whatever you need to do, and you work in bursts of time, specific time frames with a start and end point. So maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes. You set that timer. You say, okay, I'm going to accomplish this one task, or I'm going to answer emails, or really learn to block your time if you find that you're not able to concentrate. And this is in small increments, 15 to 20 minutes, and then take a break. And then set the timer, and then take a break. The next could be streamlining technology, and this includes social media, news headlines, having pop-ups appear on your phone with news alerts, everything. We're stretched to the max right now with technology, and although it improves our lives, like, hello, this webinar right now, it could also be just very distracting. So identify what your distractors are, and skipping down a few bullets. For instance, Freedom and Cold Turkey apps can block certain things off of your phone and your computer. I personally have Freedom on my laptop, and when I need to really get stuff done and really focus, I shut off Facebook because that's my weakness. So know what your weakness is and what needs to get done. And for instance, with Freedom, you could also shut off websites. So you can basically lock down your entire computer and, let's say, only work on Excel or only work on one or two things, which can help with the Pomodoro technique when you really, truly need to be 110% focused on that task, and it's a very short amount of time. The next is establish boundaries. And that can mean telling your colleagues, okay, I'm not going to check emails the entire day. I'm going to check at 9 a.m., I'm going to check at 1 p.m., and then again at 4:30. If anything urgent comes up, please text me. So by establishing boundaries with other people, you're automatically creating boundaries with yourself. So that means you should not respond to an email at 2 p.m. If you told everyone that you're only responding at certain periods, certain time frames during the day, and 2 p.m., it's not involved with that. The next is a fun one, and it's creating a work reward system. So maybe, you do the Pomodoro technique, you do 15 minutes, take a break, 15 minutes, take a break, 15 minutes, go for a walk outside, get some fresh air. So this way you're not constantly working and constantly in the game, because we are human and we need breaks, and this is a positive way to reinforce your behavior. Maybe it's getting a cold glass of water with lemon in it or something. We talked about the apps, and those are just two. There are so many ways. There's so many apps out there that can really help streamline your to-do list, productivity, technology. I interviewed Chris Bailey last year, and he has a new book called Hyperfocus. And scatter focus which I find it fascinating because it's the opposite of what you would think for productivity. But if you've ever had a brainstorm and an amazing idea on the treadmill or in the shower, or you're outside going for a walk, and all of a sudden something emerges in your mind, that's what he means by scatter focus. Let your mind roam. And I think especially in the midst of caregiving with so much on your plate, and especially if you're a power of attorney on top of that, we just finished up tax season, and sometimes it's challenging enough getting your own taxes done, then on top of the person that you're caring for, it's a lot on your plate. So scatter focus is the permission to just let your mind roam. It's like driving a car without a destination. You're putting on some music or just letting your mind roam and letting things bubble up. And it's basically a way to clear your head. And that could also be meditation, yoga, etc. And then the last one I have here is bookmark your favorite distractions, like a YouTube video. Maybe you love Jimmy Kimmel and you want to watch his monologue every day, but you're passed out every night. So you can incorporate these distractions into your reward system. Like, okay, I'm going to work 3 Pomodoro techniques by 10 a.m., and then I'm going to spend 5 minutes looking at really cute puppy videos. So find whatever works for you and really break it down, and also be really patient and kind with yourself. You're doing an amazing job. And these tips for time and task management can hopefully help you in other areas of your life as well. Okay, so the next one is how to explain gaps. If you are looking for a job, or let's say 2 years from now, you're going to look for a job and caregiving took a significant part out of your life, and 2 years from now, or even now, you're looking for a job and you don't know what to do on your resume. How do you explain this? Let's say you took a sabbatical, or maybe you feel like you should have gotten promoted and you stayed in the job for 5 years because you knew it was comfortable and it works, and there's nothing wrong with that. So there are a couple ways to do it. Number one, I'm a former corporate recruiter, so I should say that, and it's more often to see gaps on a resume than not see gaps. So again, you are so not alone, especially during the recession years ago. If someone didn't have a gap, I was almost like, okay, that's odd, because I always saw resumes with gaps. So it's totally fine. And what you should do is you should address it up front, because they're likely going to ask, and I would not try to avoid the question. I would just say, oh, if they say, okay, walk me through this, and I noticed in 2015, there was a gap here for 4 months, or I noticed you were in this job for 6 years, and normally it's, in your industry, it's every 2 years you get promoted. You can say something like, oh, I had a personal situation arise, and I really had to devote myself, my entire self to it, and it wasn't fair to my employer or me to not be focused, and life happens. Again, it's illegal for the employer to ask countless questions, like what's your religion, are you planning to have kids, anything, so along those lines. And so what you decide to reveal is they really should not be able to probe along these lines. But what I found, for instance, my father passed away and there was a gap in my resume. And when I got my last recruiting job several years ago, I basically told my hiring manager, my boss, I was like, oh, my father was really sick. I knew he was going to pass away, and I wanted to take time and she was awesome. And she's like, oh, no problem. Like, it was almost too much information, to be honest with you. And a lot of times employers may feel uncomfortable because we're so used to talking about caring and the inevitable, and it could be really sad and overwhelming. But employers usually don't want to, once they hear that, they should hopefully be understanding and end the conversation. And for me, I just wanted to put it out there, and it's like basically one sentence. And you can put it on your resume as well, because then you won't even have to talk about it, especially if you're really upset about it. You clearly don't want to be upset during a job interview, but for me, it was a phone interview. You can just have it on the resume, took a year off for caregiving responsibilities for an elderly relative, and then you pivot. So, and I should back up. I remember even I had one candidate who said, oh, my grandmother was ailing and she meant so much to me, so I took 4 months off, and I'm so grateful I did. And then you pivot. And then he said, but now I'm back on my feet and I'm focused and I'm ready to look for a job, because when I was taking care of her, I gave it my 100%. And that's the type of worker that I am. So there's a way to talk about it, but you don't have to reveal so much personal information, but you can also pivot, because your focus is, okay, what's the gap? And then most importantly, here's where it's turning. And that applies to anyone who, let's say, took time off to travel or learn a new language, or they were so burnt out on their job and they just needed a timeout. That's perfectly fine. But the notion is, okay, what did you do? Why is there a gap? And most importantly, okay, what are you doing now? So even if the gap was a few years ago, or even if it's now, et cetera, you can say, have that prepared to say, because someone is going to ask you about it during the interview. I would also include on the resume a succinct one-liner, and then hopefully they may not even ask, because it can be uncomfortable. So they may not even ask. But I would definitely mind the gap and be aware of it, and there's nothing wrong with it. Just be able to explain it and then pivot to your next opportunity. Okay, so now we're going to open it up for questions. Whether you're self-employed, working full-time, part-time, looking for a job, please feel free to ask away.
So once again, if you have any questions or comments, you could type them in on the right-hand side in the Go to Webinar Control panel, and we will be happy to take any questions that you have. So we have a first question. If you are with the company less than a year, can the time off be prorated? Prorated. I am so sorry. Prorated.
That is a great question. By prorated, well, I'm going to tackle this in two ways. Number one, for FMLA, you need to be with the company for the minimum of 12 months. So, I mean, you can always talk to your HR person about that, but it's my understanding per that policy, the answer would be no. However, the second part of that answer is you may have personal time that you can tap into. So with some companies you accrue every 2 weeks and you can go negative, let's say with your time bank for maybe 40 hours or 80 hours. So definitely find out if you can go negative with your time, and if that time that you take, let's say you take 2 weeks off, if that can be added on to part of your employment for the 12 months. That's a great question. And also depends on how long, let's say what the company's policy is for their own personal time off.
Okay. We have another question. If I'm at a job for 4 years, I've been caring for my mom, and I recently came back from leave, am I entitled to another leave? If so, how long is it in between?
That's another great question. I believe it's within a 12-month period. So when you come back, I believe it's not and it's on a rolling basis. So it's not like by, let's say, what's today, May 9th. So let's say you came back May 9th, that I believe it's not that you would be eligible for the next calendar year, January 1. I think it would be the next, let's say, May 9th, 2020. Or actually when you first took your leave, which probably would have been February 2020. So again, these are really good questions to also meet with your HR person, because your company may have specific policies or a shared time bank or something additional that you can really tap into. And it's just good to know your own time. Let's say you're caring for your mom and you just got back from leave and you're thinking, okay, I need to take another one, but I can't. And that's another question I get often from people is, when do I take my leave? Because this is ongoing, and I could take it now, but I could take it in July, I could take it in December, but I can't take leave the entire year. So you can find out, for instance, I know I'm just well versed in Deloitte because I researched them so closely last year, that it could be, let's say, 2 weeks with them, and I believe, so it could have changed. So I shouldn't speak out of turn. So some companies, I speak generally, some companies may have it where you can take 2 weeks, come back, and then maybe take a month. So you can see if you can split it, because it is difficult, because in an ongoing situation, it seems like there's never a right or wrong time. So it's really the matter of figuring out what is going on right now, and can you make it in smaller blocks, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. You mentioned something about employees needing to live within 50 miles of the office for FMLA. Is this a certain percentage of the employees?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I could find out through an employment attorney, but I do know it's like the company has to have the employees within 75 miles. I don't know if it's like 50% of the employees, especially now with such a remote workforce. I was actually surprised. I'm actually surprised by the 75-mile radius, because so many people can work remotely or work at a client site, etc. So I do not know, but I can find out.
We have another question regarding that, and I think you might have just answered it. Can you explain further the 75-mile radius piece of FMLA, especially as it applies to remote workers? So you just answered that. Thank you. Okay. Can you also speak about intermittent FMLA?
I don't know what you mean by that. Do you mean, can you type in more information? That would be great. Or expand upon your question. And just to reiterate what FMLA is, in case you joined the call late, is that it's job-protected unpaid leave that you need to work with an employer for at least 12 months. And that equates to, and they have a stipulation of about 1,250 hours. And the company has to have at least 50 employees. within 75-mile radius of the work site. However, different states can have different rules, such as in New York, they offer 10 weeks of partial paid leave, which is 55%, which will go up to 67% by 2021.
Okay. The question was referring to, I think this refers to using blocks of time during the FMLA request. So are you able to split the weeks? Or do you have to do it all at one time?
You know, I need to look into this further. I think it might be all at one time, but I can double check, and I apologize, I don't know, because all my research and even the sources that I've talked to have always said 12 months. But I know with certain companies, with their policies that may supersede that, certain companies, you can take blocks, because we know it's a start and stop situation. It's not necessarily always continuous.
Okay. Do you need to use up all of your paid leave time, sick and vacation, before you take FLMA?
I think you need to check with your HR company, with the HR department in your company, to find out, number one, what are you looking at? What are the numbers? And then when can you tap into FMLA? Or can you tap into it on the back end of FMLA? So this way you can, it's smart that you're thinking about that. Okay, how can you really group and all of your time off into a bucket to make it prolonged? So I would definitely talk to HR to find out what your options are, and then take it from there, and also start looking at calendar dates. And then another thing we should talk about is just how to roll off your work. I mean, it's similar to preparing, literally, if you're taking a leave, okay, who's going to do certain parts of your job? Who do you need to train? So when you do talk to your boss about this, or talk to HR and say, okay, how many days are in my bank? And if I don't forget, like, let's say you're planning now to take off as of July, you may still be accruing time between now and July. So you want to factor all this in. That's why it's always important to speak directly to HR within your own company about the time, but also have a transition plan in place. Because if you think that your boss may push back, or your boss needs to agree because their company falls under the FMLA rules, and even if they don't, let's say your company is completely supportive of you, you still want to think, okay, how am I going to transition this? What's the timing? Put together a schedule, break down your job responsibilities, see who you can speak with within your department, who you can train, who can backfill for you. And the same goes for when you return from leave, to figure out, okay, there may be some ramp up time involved. Maybe your department rolls out a new technology and you need to be trained on it. So you also want to think about the return from leave. Okay, how am I going to do this? And also, maybe upon your return, you could speak to your boss prior to the official restart date, but maybe you need to adjust and do flexible work arrangement or job sharing situation, because maybe the situation changed with the person you're caring for, and you will return to work, but maybe you need to return in another capacity. It's job protected, so it's not like you're going to lose your job during the 12 weeks of unpaid time with the FMLA, but when you return, you may need to, like I say, get retrained on something. So really think of that transition time, returning to work when you've been out of work for a few months.
Okay, thank you. Is there any formal FMLA paperwork that needs to be completed, and if so, by who? Medical doctor or nursing home administrator?
It's a great question. Again, I'm wondering if this question is to really prove that someone is ill, and it's not like you're just making this up. But again, this is really an important opportunity when you speak with HR to find out, get the paperwork on the FMLA site. I believe everything is online, but also find out from your company in terms of what approvals you may need, most likely from your boss, but also, let's say, a health administrator or some type of proof to show, yes, this is the person I'm caring for. And the other thing we need to touch upon is FMLA covers spouse, child, or parent with a serious health condition. It doesn't say like in-law, it doesn't say cousin. And we know in this day and age with modern families, friends become family, and you may find yourself that you're caring for, let's say, an aunt or an uncle who's not covered under this. So that's why I think it's important to be transparent and upfront with your own employer, because they, like I said earlier, they may have their own policy, or you may not be eligible for FMLA, but maybe they have their own separate policy, or maybe they have a shared time bank, and and you can find out from HR basically what, with your own company, what are you eligible for.
Okay. We have a question. Have you noticed in your experience an uptick in employee awareness?
I have, and I think we're headed in the right direction, because I think employers know the statistics that I mentioned earlier, the billions and billions of dollars lost every year. It's not only the sense that companies are pouring focus and money into wellness programs for employees, because they know that the happy worker is a productive worker, and if you're happy, you're going to stay with the company, and your output's going to be awesome, your morale is going to be higher, and I think that they really are beginning to realize, okay, we realize that this is an issue, and as more companies have their own policies or shared time banks or offer resources, free counseling even, it may not necessarily be that they can offer you the time, but maybe they have an in-house, let's say, elder care attorney that you can tap into, or a resource network or community. A lot of companies have affinity groups right now. So as employer awareness increases, I think we're headed in the right direction, because 1 in 6 American workers is a caregiver, and that's significant. So I think they're seeing this. This isn't going away. This is a trend that's going to stay and actually increase as baby boomers live longer. So it's something that they're in the process of addressing, and hopefully, I think we're headed in the right direction, and I would love to see more significant strides be made in the time off situation, understanding, and compassion.
My understanding that your job is protected as a certain category. For example, as teacher, your role of teacher is protected, but you may not return to the same classroom.
I pause because these are really awesome questions, so thank you. That's my understanding as well, but for any of these specific questions, I think an elder care attorney or an employment attorney or an HR person will really be better suited, but that's my understanding as well, because even when I worked in corporate, there were situations, before recruiting, I worked in training and then international HR, and there were situations that I was aware of that someone said, okay, I'm going on leave, and you're guaranteed a job when you left that's similar to yours, not necessarily the same exact job and the same exact role, and the same, let's say here in the situation, same exact classroom. And it could be different also for government workers versus non-government. So there are some things to investigate, but yes, I say yes with an asterisk, just because, again, the employment attorneys know all, and I would say in that case, I have the same understanding as you, but again, for anything that pertains to you, talk to your HR department, find out based on your situation. Also, let's say you are a teacher and the summer's coming, and then, so you would be off anyway, and let's say you take a leave in the fall. What if they do need to staff your classroom with another teacher for the year? Does that mean you go into a different classroom, let's say in November or December?
You mentioned the employment lawyer. What about if someone can afford an employee lawyer? Is there in different states numbers that employers could call to make a complaint if they feel like they're not getting FMLA or being treated unjustly because they need to take a leave? Can you do that not through a lawyer, but through state representation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, you can definitely, there are 1-800 numbers for each state. And you may be bounced around a few times, the different 1-800 numbers. I've called for various things, but you can eventually get through, because the point is that employers need to be held accountable. The same way you're held accountable as an employee, and if you see something that's going on, I would say document everything and try to get in touch. And some communities have pro bono lawyers who offer assistance. So again, it all just depends on your specific region, but there are resources available that you can tap into to hopefully find that right person who can guide you and who can help you, because you may feel like, okay, this is my situation, it's a little unique, I work part-time, or I've been with this company for 5 years, but I did take a leave, and what's the next step? So that's why everyone's situation is a little different. So that's why the employment attorneys come in handy. I should say, when you're speaking to an employment attorney, make sure they're written in your same state, because that's important, because the laws can differ by state, and really get specific so they know what your situation is. And then the question is, if you work, let's say, in New York City here, but you live in Connecticut or New Jersey, I would still find an employment attorney for the state in which you work.
Thank you. We had one of the listeners share that, I think from an earlier question, that in New Jersey, if anyone's listening in the state of New Jersey, you'll need 2 doctors to certify your FMLA. So thank you, Tracy, for sharing that information. So we do have about 10 minutes left of the presentation. So if anyone has any further questions or comments or anything that they'd like to add, we would love to hear from you. Okay. Sometimes things don't work out the way you would like it. My sister took FMLA for my dad. It turned out to be long-term, and she decided to stop working. He died a year later, and she had to find a new job.
Wow. First of all, I'm so sorry that your dad passed away, and you're absolutely right. I'm glad that you shared that, because it's true. We could have the best laid plans, and things happen, and your parent or the loved one you're caring for could take a turn for the worse, and then you may just need to stop working. And then that goes back to the mind the gap on your resume. Let's say she stopped working, she had to look for a new job. If there was a time lapse in between, let's say that year, then you can say that this is what happened and I'm looking for it. And okay, and so we just got this comment. I should say she doesn't regret it. So I'm glad that you added that too, because it's important to say, especially in such a work-centric culture as America, we're so driven. The first question people ask is usually not how are you, and especially as a caregiver, it's never really a how are you. It's how's your mom, how's your dad, and then later in the conversation, maybe it comes up how are you. But of course, it's always like, what do you do for a living, or what's your job, or what do you do? It's not like how are you, how's your day, what do you do? And our identity is so inextricably linked to our job that we may feel guilty. We're taking care of the caregiver, we're taking care of the patient, we're not taking care of ourselves, but we've got this job, and will it look bad that we lost our job, or, will we look bad that we just had to stop working? No. And again, it depends on your financial situation and decisions, but absolutely not. If you can be 100% focused on that person in this situation, she doesn't regret it. Her father is sadly no longer around, and that time is so valuable, and it's so precious. And you can get another job, and hopefully she's back on her feet. And at that point, you revise your resume, and you can add a line saying primary caregiver, or I was in charge of an ailing parent, and you don't even have to say that much, and then pivot. Now I'm looking for a new job. I'm focused, and maybe it's actually a time for you. Maybe you want to go into a whole new area. Maybe this is really, maybe you decide that your job really didn't provide fulfillment for you, and so you're looking for a new job. And she's doing well, so that's awesome. This is such a good story. I'm so glad that you shared that anecdote, because the fact that she took time off, doesn't regret it, she's doing well, and now she's back on her feet. And most important thing is she doesn't regret it. So again, with work so linked to our lives and what we do in our identity, if you need to take that time off and just make a hard break and say, I can't do this my job right now is being with my loved one. And even if you're not caring for them 100%, just the time spent with them is really valuable. And that's what we need to keep in mind, that this work stuff will figure itself out while you're caregiving. From what I've seen in people approaching me about the topic who are caregivers, is that work takes second priority or down the list. It's not the number one priority, and that's okay. There are times in your life when it will be number one, and there are times in your life when work will not be number one. And so right now, it's just a matter of how do you navigate through that and make the best decisions for yourself. And I just also want to add, if you joined late, I'm the founder, Vicki Salemi, the founder of Exhale First. Please feel free to join our Facebook group. We have a thriving community for caregivers like yourself who are in it together, sharing information, sometimes funny memes. Sometimes we just need a really good joke to lift us up. And sign up for the newsletter on our website, exhalefirst.com.
Thank you. We have another question. Would FMLA cover an employee's need to drop in on an assisted living facility to check in on a parent with dementia?
Meaning, I just want to make sure I understand the question, that someone like an authority from the government would check in with the parent?
I think what the question is referring to would FMLA cover if the family needs to go and visit their person in a facility. Is that considered an FMLA cover?
Oh, meaning if someone, let's say the parent has 100% care.
Well, we're getting clarification. No, the employees would like to leave their work to visit. So, on a Monday, they need to go visit the whole day. On a Friday, they need to go visit the whole day. Would that be covered under FMLA, or is that like your personal time?
That is such a good question. I wish I could say with 100% conviction, yes, it would be covered, but the person does have care. So again, these are really good questions. I think it depends if let's say your parent has 100% care, assisted living, and it doesn't cover for you to visit, I would think that should be covered. But again, this could be something that I could check out further.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. When you're getting your FMLA, do you still get like your 401 and your benefits, or does that stop when you're on FMLA?
It's my understanding your health benefits continue, but your 401k would probably stop because there's nothing to take out of if you're not getting a paycheck during that time, but you would still be eligible, let's say, if you have dental coverage and medical coverage.
Thank you. We do have a couple of moments for some more questions. I want to say this audience has been giving us really great questions. So we do have a couple of moments, and we'd love to hear from you.
And while you're thinking of your questions before we close out, again, just with Exhale First, the site's going to have a lot of robust information, classes, etc. And we're going to start having events this fall, which will be really fun to pamper yourself, because as we know, with family support for elder care, we've got their backs, but we need to have our own backs as well. So the Exhale First, it's all about self-care, information, community, as we do this and get through caregiving together, because no one really plans for this, and we're in it, and we find ourselves in it. So definitely feel free to join the Facebook group, Exhale First.
Okay, so we are nearing the end of today's presentation. I want to thank Vicki Salemi for her wealth of knowledge. I certainly learned some new information today, and I hope all of you did too. I always want to welcome everyone back next month for our Care Connection program. Like I said to you before, on the right-hand side under handouts, this PowerPoint is in PDF, and we do have other material through AFA and some information. Again, I want to thank Vicki, and I want to thank all of you for taking time out. I do have one more question. They keep coming. I love questions. So thank you. Was very helpful to hear that gaps in resume are common these days. So that's reassuring, knowing that a gap in a resume isn't going to be your downfall in landing a job, that employers are understanding that this is a commonality. So thank you for giving us that reassurance, Vicki. As I was saying, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy days. We welcome you back next month, and I hope everyone has a good rest of their afternoon. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.